I think we're live now. Yeah, okay. Hey guys, we got Phil with us. We're going to have a great show. We're going to play the intro and get started. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Typical Skeptic Podcast. I'm really excited about my guest tonight. Tonight I have with me Phil Warder. He's the creator of the Unexplained Inc podcast, a podcast digging deep into the paranormal, timeline anomalies, mystical guidance, spiritual awakening, and the unexplained forces shaping our reality. Phil is certified in core shamanism, Usui Reiki, and spiritual-based hypnosis. Phil's show blends interviews with experiencers, researchers, and thought leaders in the Fringe, including guests from Forbidden Knowledge News, expanding everything from Mandela Effects to timeline jumping, spiritual warfare, near-death experiences, haunted locations, and multidimensional insights. His mission with the Unexplained Inc. is to help others embrace the curiosity, move beyond fear, and transform the unexplained to the extraordinary and empowering. Tonight we'll talk about, shamanism, Reiki, and hypnosis, simulation theory, mystical guides and synchronicities, the dark side of spiritual warfare, Mandela Effects, practical ways to navigate the matrix, and all kinds of stuff. So, and you can follow Phil on his Instagram at unexplained_Inc_official. And I have that in the description. And then his podcast is on all platforms, I'm guessing. And then also his website is podcast.unexplainedinc.com. That's his website. And I'd like to give him a big warm welcome to the show for the first time. Phil, thanks so much for coming on. How are you?
I'm tremendous, Rob. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the detailed intro. You got a lot of great stuff off the bat there.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I got to thank ChatGPT. It's like it helps me get ready for shows. But so tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you get into this? Did you always have experiences growing up, or are you an experiencer?
It's kind of funny is that I feel like my experiencing is still a little ways ahead of me. It's still a little ways down the road. I did not have little, if any, growing up. I had a couple of minor ones in my adult life. Where this comes from, and I always tie back to this when I talk about how I got into the show, is I have an older brother, of course, so he's an influence on me. And growing up back in the day, this is literally like late 80s when we had 6 channels on our television. We became big fans of the show Unsolved Mysteries. And in I guess a parallel paths of fate, if you will, quite a few years ago, I think it was actually almost 10 years ago, he started a true crime podcast reviewing cold cases. It's called The Trail Went Cold, and he's been very successful with it. And part of me saw that success, and I have a background in media and radio broadcasting, and I said to him, maybe I should start something in my own interest. Fast forward to the year 2019. This got abandoned, mostly due to the lockdown climates and such, and a couple of other things. But I was looking to start my own videography practice or business with some of my background. And I had this idea at work one day where I said, you know who could use a videographer? Ghost hunters or paranormal investigators. And I thought, I'm in South Central Ontario, Canada. There's a lot of rich history here. There's a lot of haunted history. A lot of it is underexplored, in my opinion. But I thought maybe if I connected with a team, I could go out with them, do video documents of these investigations, and bring them into a podcast. And I just thought, what a tremendous idea this would be. And through fate, a friend of mine hooked me up with a family from Brantford, Ontario, who were all in paranormal investigation. And the only problem is they played a big part in getting me to launch the show and get it off the ground early in 2020. But then we all know what happened in spring of 2020. And my original release date for the show was going to be on the 20th of March. And that's when everything was in chaos. So I decided to put it on hold. I had 2 episodes finished, and then I was going to postpone it 1 week to see what happened. And that's where I launched it. And everything just kind of evolved from there. Now, in terms of going out on investigations and documenting them, I have only been able to do that a time or two since I started the show 5 years ago. And my original idea, obviously, with lockdown restrictions, was canceled, put on ice, if you will. And eventually that family would move down closer to the Windsor area near the Michigan border. And as far as I know, they're out of the investigation game altogether. But that has opened up space for new people to come in. So that's a brief Cole's Nose version of how the show got started and how I leaned into all of this. Just exploring a fascination and a passion, if you will.
Yeah, but then you kind of took a healing approach as well, right? Because like you got certified in core shamanism, Usui Reiki, and spiritual-based hypnosis. Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
I certainly do, and I got to backtrack a little bit more on this journey because it's really insane. And for those that are watching right now, the logo on the one end of my shoulder, if you can't read it underneath, it says, "Where the unknown connects with the empowered." That is the tagline I have been using for the show since 2022 because I just didn't want to talk about the unexplained and the typical ghost cryptid and ET UFO stuff. I wanted to bring in more of a metaphysical aspect and share aspects of my own healing journey and spiritual journey in the event of educating and helping others. And this is where the show really exists in its current form now. And I was able to put the two paths together. Now, to give you a little bit of background on my spiritual path, in September of 2013, I went and had my first Reiki session done as a client. And going into that, I really had no idea what I was getting into. I was highly skeptical. And I remember going to the parking lot of the clinic, and before I shut the engine off in my car, I almost drove away because I just had this moment where I was like, what am I even doing here? Like, this is probably like snake oil or something, right? And how it came on my radar was back then I was working a pretty stressful physical job that went into the late hours of the night. And when I got home, rest of the house, the family, the pets, they were all asleep. So I would go on my computer and I would find videos on YouTube to help me relax, help me come down from that adrenaline. And I would find meditation videos and all these things. And then somewhere on my feed, I see a demonstration of Reiki or energy healing. And I'm like, what is this? And I liked the video and something pulled me to explore it more. So fast forward a couple of months down the road, I get this session for the very first time. And after the session is done and over with, it was about an hour. It was a mix of hands-on and hands-off energy work. I felt like I was reborn and that I had some form of an exorcism, if you will. And to elaborate on that, I wasn't holding on to old grudges anymore. Energetically speaking, I felt lighter. And I was at a very challenging point in my life. And one thing the practitioner said to me was, your biggest area of concern is your throat chakra, which means unspoken words. And at that time, I was sitting on a conversation that was going to change my life. I didn't get to that conversation for a few months down the road, but this practitioner nailed it bang on. And I remembered later in the day, I was just going to ground and spend time in nature. And like, I couldn't stop laughing at everything. I had a very stressful year or two before that. And then everything about me lightened it up. And I just said, I got to lean into this further. So I went back again and again, did some mindfulness work. And then that's when the doors really burst wide open. And I could get into this too a little bit if you want to, but within the weeks and months after that session, I started having what I consider to be psychic premonitions in my dreams.
Wow, that's interesting. Like, what were you seeing? Like, were they probably like precognitive stuff, like future predictions?
Yeah, So some of it I can't get into because, number one, it's really hard to explain. And some of it is also quite personal. So I'll do the best I can here. On the positive, I was seeing a lot of specific locations in specific faces of people. And one of the people I saw, it's someone who I had interacted before, but I didn't know them very well. And they ended up being what I consider a signpost. And to me, a signpost is someone who you think is going to have a big impact on your life, but they're really there to guide you onto a different part of the journey. And I thought that's what this person was. And I really freaked out after one dream I had where I saw them sitting at a table wearing like a certain colored like cardigan. And then like 3 or 4 days later, I saw it in the 3D, like here in the physical. And then that just made me go, okay, what is happening here? Like this is really unusual. And also at this period of time, right around the corner, my marriage was about to come to an end. And I also had some premonitions about some of the quarrels, if you will, that I would end up getting into. And they were symbolic in their own crazy way. But whatever happened during that session, something opened me up energetically. And at the time, I was in pretty good shape. I was eating right. And something like it was almost like a portal opened, and spirit was like, okay, you're going to have a lot of difficult decisions ahead. Here's how I can guide you around them. And they don't happen with me as much as I used to. And I think it's because I've learned to communicate with the non-physical in so many other different ways that it doesn't have to get used through my dreams anymore, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does. That does. That's interesting. So, yeah, I'm trying to think. So, what have you taken from them? Would you say, like,
guidance overall?
Yeah.
Like I said, I have no rhyme, reason, or prediction as to when they're going to come, but I feel like they come on time when they're supposed to come. And whether it's positive or negative, it's up for me to decide, and I journal them the best that I can. And sometimes they're so vivid, I don't even need a journal because I can like remember them frame for frame. And then that's the point in the journey when I knew things were going to another level. And just a couple of, I guess, precautions I took at this period in time was I reached out. I was a listener, and I still am to this day, of the Psychic Teachers podcast out of North Carolina. And I actually wrote to one of the hosts via email because like I was getting so freaked out by this and just having a very elementary level of understanding about it all. And she wrote back to me, gave me a really nice response, recommended a book to me by famous author on metaphysical subjects, Larry Dossey. And I think the book was called Premonitions. I can't remember off the top of my head. It was over a decade ago that I read it. And that book opened my eyes to realize that people all over the world are going through with this, but they're having some really serious ones. Like they're having dreams about like their child dying, and then they wake up in the middle of the night and they realize that, oh, their child stopped breathing and they have to take it to the hospital to, survive or whatever. And they would have never have known or caught it in time if it had not been for that dream or that premonition. And another thing that happened was I had a really good rapport with this Reiki practitioner at the time. And I talked about some other interesting phenomenon that was going on. Like I was getting these really unusual, like buzzing and tingling sensations in my hands and like the back of my neck, sometimes near my ears. So I asked her about it one day. And she looks at me plain as day and goes, "Oh, that's just your guides." And I nod, but I'm like, my what? Like at this point in time, this, any non-physical or spirit guidance is completely foreign to me at the time. And like, that was my moment of like, like Luke Skywalker going with Ben Kenobi across the galaxy to learn the Force. It was just like, I've stepped into something here I can't even begin to understand. And it's just snowballed up from there.
Wow, that's amazing. Like, and then when did you start like embracing like the shamanism stuff as well?
Yeah, so that came a few years later in later in the spring of 2019. Long story short, I kind of hit the wall at this point in my life. So when the floodgates opened for me, I started studying things like manifestation, the law of attraction, stuff like that, a lot of other metaphysical things, if you will. However, back then I could safely say I kind of misunderstood them, and it led me to have a bit of an entitled attitude towards it. And there are so many different moving parts in regards to that. And it's like, you don't always get directly what you want just from asking for it. I mean, it is possible, but there are other plans and other forces in effect, and I didn't quite understand that. And let's just say in some ways my life had taken a turn that I didn't quite understand, and it wasn't a positive one. And I was, like I said, I hit the wall, and I was being controlled and driven by my ego, and I was kind of acting entitled in certain ways and trying to force outcomes of things. And by no accident, because I think we all know here there's no accidents, right? Like, I'm meeting a buddy of mine for dinner who lives about an hour away from me, and I end up way ahead of schedule. And with that being said, on the way to the restaurant we were going to, I ended up at a mall that had a famous chain bookstore in it. I think it still does. And I just started going to, like, the spiritual new age metaphysical section, whatever you want to call it. And I find this book. Have you ever heard of an author named Jeff D. Nixa? I'll be very surprised if you have, but
No, I haven't.
So it's interesting. This book, and I'm just doing this from memory, it's in the other room here, but it's called The Lost Art of Heart Navigation, a guide to, it's either core shamanism or urban shamanism. And it has like the most beautiful book cover you have ever seen. And I flipped through it, and what do I find out? That Jeff Nixa was a lawyer. He was either a lawyer or a law clerk turned hospice chaplain turned urban shaman. And he relocated from California, I believe, to like Indiana, somewhere in the American Midwest. And I was like, how do you have a career arc like that? That is fascinating to me. And the gist of his book was, he talks about living and navigating through the heart space, and that he had taken up these shamanic practices and he had made his own practice and his own business out of them. And from what I saw from his own business and his book, he was doing what I call spiritual counseling. Like, he was taking in clients who were just completely lost in life and hit the wall, which was right where I was at when I found this book. And another funny thing that I remember physically and vividly about this too was, it was the only copy of this book in the entire store, and could have been the only one in the whole county for all that I've known. I've had other instances where I need to find a physical book at one of the major chains, and then it's like, oh, there's one in the county and it happens to be at the shop near your place, and it's like, okay, like, it was one of those situations. So anyway, I highly recommend that book for anyone who is looking to even maybe not practice or study shamanism, but wants more information about it. I've tried reaching out to Jeff Nixa before. I don't know if the email's active. I don't know if his website is still up and running. I don't even know if he still has his practice after the pandemic or whatever. But his book, absolute game changer for me. And the biggest takeaway I took from it was, near the end, he has a chapter on like additional resources and information. And he says, because I was considering booking a session and going to see him out in like rural Indiana or wherever he was. Like, you know, Indiana's like not even 8-hour drive for me. So I was like, this is feasible, you know. But he says in this book, near the end of it, if you look in your area, I bet you'll find a practitioner just like me. And I just went, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And I never would have found this had I not read this book. And in a really bizarre twist of fate, I found a practitioner who, I kid you not, lived about 15 minutes north of the mall that I picked the book up from, like right in front of my face. So later that spring, I start to go see this practitioner as a client, and I get some table healing done with the drums and all that. And it's very helpful. It's helping me along. It's helping my energy along and my mindset. And we have a good working relationship together, like me as a client, her as a practitioner. And then, of course, much like how I wanted to start the podcast, the lockdowns happen. And it's funny, this practitioner was working a full-time corporate job over Zoom even before the pandemic, oddly enough. And they got really spooked about it. And they said, no, shutting the business down in the summer of 2020. And I'm just like, oh, this is great. I find this new amazing thing. And the door's getting slammed in my face, like story of my life. But anyway, that summer, we have a really solid phone call with each other, like just before she closes up shop. And she says to me, she's like, you should be doing this work. Like your energy levels and your aura, it's like you have the aura of a healer. And at this point in time, over the last few years, I kept hearing this from people more and more. Like, say I go to a trade show or whatever, they do the aura photography. I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll try this. And then there's like light blue around me and they're like, oh, you're a healer. And I'm like, come on, really? Like, you know, not really believing it. And it just gets reinforced by this practitioner. So I said, okay, once we start getting out of this, I'm going to look into this because the world is totally nuts right now. And I think people might need more of this type of healing out there. So I'm going to try and step into this. So long story short, the later months of 2020, I completely like crash and burn. Like things are not going well for me at all. However, the one bright spot is I take a look at some other practitioners who might be doing work remotely or doing it in person. We were in that weird gray area where the lockdowns would be open partially and then they would close back and forth. And it got really bad here in Ontario, like I'm sure many of you have heard. And we were in one of those in-between phases, and I thought maybe I can go see someone in person. So I just go online and I find a practitioner that's like less than 20 minutes down the road from me. Another person I never knew existed until I looked. And from there, some of the other teachers I was looking to get training from, they had the same training and the same certification at a better price with less distance to travel. And they were willing to host some of these in person. And I was like, yeah, this is a done deal. Like, come on. So through this person, I got certified in a lot of shamanic healing modalities. And a couple of years later, I eventually got my master's level in Usui Reiki, which I practice part-time as of now. So it's really crazy how it all just flowed together because like I allowed it, you know?
That's amazing. That's amazing. And it's amazing that like all those synchronicities happen to you. And that's what I would call them. I would call them synchronicities, that you were able to find those practitioners and like fill those voids in your life that you didn't even knew existed, you know, but like somehow you were able to, and like it put you on a whole new path, it seems like.
It did. And Yeah, we could probably do like a whole separate chat on this at some point in time. But what this did for me was it led me to tap into getting guidance from the non-physical. And the deeper you go into this work, like you really do realize death is just another stage of the evolution for us, or the evolution of the soul, and it should not be feared to the degree that it is. Should it be concerned? Yes, life, as crazy as things can get sometimes, is really wonderful and it's worth living. And I think we would rather live than die. And our soul needs experiences in order to grow. And I'm a firm believer that if you do die by your own hands, you're probably coming right back here, no questions asked, and you may have a bit of a rougher path in front of you. That's all I can say there. But I think one story I'd like to share right now is about connecting with power animals, because this is a great place to start with this area. Rob, have you talked to people about spirit animals, power animals? Because I know you've done so many shows and talked to so many different people. I'm sure this has come up for you at some point in time.
A little bit, but not a lot, you know.
Okay. So this is where the twist gets a little interesting. So the first practitioner I visited, she found my power animal, and I think she said it was a burrowing owl or something like that. Like, it was something I wasn't expecting, and it fit for that period of time. The deeper I got into my studies, and when you're learning to journey, you do connect with the power animal. And I'm just going to give actually a really quick explanation on what journeying is, in case anybody doesn't know. So anybody who's done meditation, breath work, sound baths, even psychedelics, you want to get yourself to a point where the conscious mind, the monkey mind, shuts off, and then the metaphysical experiences really start. With a shamanic healing, it's no different, except this time you're using a drum with a steady beat, or a rattle, or even both, like if multiple people are doing it. And you just go into that state of theta, I guess we would call it, state of hypnosis, state of just relaxation. But unlike things like meditation, hypnosis, psychedelia, all those types of things, there's 3 specific worlds you can travel to on a shamanic journey. And it's compared to a cosmology of the tree. So you have the lower world, which is like the roots, the middle world, which is the trunk, and the branches and the leaves are the upper world. The lower world you would travel to for guidance. And when I say lower, there's nothing scary or evil down there. It's no comparison to hell or anything like it. It's perfectly safe. It's just you going in to the underground, somewhere safe in nature, in the metaphysical, not the physical, and you connect with guides and power animals to get advice on a specific question. And that could be more 3D, earth-related questions. Whereas if you travel to the upper world, it's a realm where you get more big picture information and more information from a higher consciousness, and you could connect with beings like your higher self, angel guides, star guides, whatever you will. That's like the general gist of it. So one of the first things you learn is connecting with a power animal. And when I was doing this during my training, I connected with several, and they weren't in any relation to the one I connected to a couple of years prior, which was really neat. But this is where it gets really kind of fun. From what I remember in that session, what I was told was one of my animal guides in that realm was like a beetle, looked like a scarab beetle or whatever. And I look up the meanings online about what a beetle means, and I'm like, oh, that actually makes sense for right now. And then like a couple of months later, sitting in my living room, kind of on my computer, hot July night like this one. And I look over on my kitchen floor, and I kid you not, there's a beetle like this big around, just crawling ever so slowly on my floor. And at that time, I had lived in this place for about 7 or 8 years. I never ever seen a beetle in here before, not even in the summertime. And I'm just like, did this power animal just follow me into the physical? And to this day, I'm convinced that it did, because I've never seen one before or since that period of time in July of 2021. And to take that one step further, and once again, this is something I could have a whole separate discussions about. And I've been on Karen Holton's Quantum Guide show where I got into very in-depth discussions about this as well, is that whether this was through the Reiki or a meditation practice I did, or aligning into this work like in 2021, I have very specific animal totems in the physical that are like, how should I say this? They're like totems, just like how it goes. And they let me know when something important is going to happen. And I'll tell you my most recent one, because it just happened literally like about 24 hours ago from this airing. Long story short, that I won't get into right now, I unlocked a very deep level of shadow work within myself yesterday afternoon. And like, this one really hurt. This was a tough one to process and get through, but I got through it. I did what I needed to do, but I made a little pact with myself that I said, okay, after dinner, I'm going to go treat myself to some comfort food, to some junk. I'm making real strides in my physical fitness, what I'm eating and all this, but I was just like, my nervous system is shot. I'm throwing that out the window for this evening. So I just kind of went to the store, buy a couple of snacks for myself, and I'm walking out. And this is my main OG spirit animal. I look up in the sky, and there's a mourning dove just flapping its wings like crazy, flies right over my head and lands on the lamppost across the road from where I'm walking. And I just kind of give them a little, hello, nice to see you. I'm sure something's coming up. And long story short, I had a very significant communication that took place earlier this afternoon. And I think the dove was giving me warning about it. So like, this type of thing has come like second nature to me now, and it just goes on and on and on. It's really amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I've never really thought about adopting or taking on a spirit animal, and like did you just know? Did you just get a knowing? I guess that these were your spirit animals. Is that or you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a really good question to ask, because every so often I try to think about when this started and I can't fully remember. But here's what I could kind of piece together. In spring of 2018, I had been doing fairly consistent yoga practice for about 4 years at that point, and I gotten to know a few teachers. And this one teacher and her partner, they were hosting this rural retreat a couple hours north of me, and I signed up to go. And we did like a meditation exercise that was very deep and profound for me. And it was right around that time or right after when I remembered seeing the doves. And I was like, okay, this is really unusual. And then I do some online work on it, and then I find out what they're supposed to mean. And I'm like, oh, this isn't that unusual. And there were times when there was either a key event or a key person I had to like connect with. And there are times where I'm walking out to my car, and I'm not kidding, a dove will be walking around on the ground, to the point where, not that I would ever do this, but I could almost probably put my foot out and step on it. Like, it was that close to me. And like, birds don't get that close to you, like, unless you're training them, you know what I mean? And it just compiled over the years, and it just kept happening over and over again, to the point where I was like, okay, number one, this is no accident. And number two, like, I'm starting to read what this actually means. Like I have a system. It's like, if I see one dove, it means this. If I see two, it means this. If they fly across my windshield while driving, that means pay attention. If I see them walking around on the ground, whether I walk by or drive by them, that like this means something big. And it was all just a real trial and error process. And I'm actually seeing a question in your comments right now I'd like to address while we're on this. It says, how do you find out, or can you pick your own? So I don't think you pick any of these on your own. I think they choose you. Why? I don't know. When I had the experiences like with the burrowing owl and the beetle, like that's what came to me. I never consciously said, oh, I want those animals. And even with the dove, even though it's a beautiful bird, I never consciously said, oh, I want guidance from doves in the physical and the non-physical. I never made that intention whatsoever. And there's a shamanic practitioner who's actually closer to Toronto. She put out this beautiful book that I also think came out in 2021 called, I think it was called The Ultimate Guide to Shamanism. And it's about all of her experiences and going to Peru and all that. And it's actually a really good starting point to read up on shamanic practices as well. And I joined like a webinar when the book came out, and she told this awesome story about how she wanted to, when she was doing her very first connection with a power animal, she's like, I want a jaguar, I want a tiger, I want something fierce. And then she ended up getting something like a little insect or something. I don't remember what the animal was, but it wasn't anything like ferocious that she wanted. And for a little while, she was actually like upset about it. But then she learned the lesson that she's like, okay, that's just my ego. This was shown to me for a certain reason. And yeah, goes from there. And anytime you see an animal, like for example, here we get robins flying around in the spring all the time. And like, that's just spring. But if you see an animal in an unusual place and you feel like either tension or a buzzing in the heart chakra or the solar plexus, and then you see this animal in unusual locations repeated over and over again, that's likely something trying to communicate with you and could be your totem. So I hope that all helps.
Yeah, that does. It's amazing. And Marie Klein says in the audience, she says you can also use your imagination. She says she loves tigers and butterflies. And so maybe that's what that's I like that. And then Kitsilile says I've seen a lot of slugs lately. Maybe you're so look up the meaning behind that, Kitsilile, and see what that, if it has any meaning and if it relates to you. That's what I would do next. That's I love that. So let's talk a little bit about the podcast, like because I saw you cover a lot of interesting stuff. I was listening to that one thing about the UFO encounter in Minnesota. I think it happened in '78. That was so interesting. I was trying to follow. That was amazing.
Oh, thank you. That is a segment I just started pretty recently. So for a little while, I changed the podcast from one weekly episode to 12 season episodes. And it worked great for a while. It was good for my workflow. And then I had to rebuild all my momentum at the beginning of each new season. And I was like, this isn't worth it anymore. I have to switch this up. So early in the winter of 2024, I was making some changes while being on a seasonal break. And then I said, you know what? I've got enough to go on to where when I reboot in the spring of 2024, I can just keep going without stopping, without getting overwhelmed, which was happening to me in the past. And I made a conscious decision to implement some solo episodes, which is something I hadn't done at the very beginning. One of those solo segments is called the Astral Report. And this is, Robert, what you were referring to. Um, I'll get into a little side story first, if you don't mind, because it all connects.
Yeah.
Fall of 2023, I had a Southern Ontario man on my show who at the time was running ghost tours and had a lot of cool metaphysical courses and stuff set up. Those have all gone by the wayside, and he's kind of, I don't know, gone on his own path. We're not really in touch anymore. But in late 2023, November, December, he's running an online astral projection course. And I say to myself, hey, why don't I take this? This is something I've always been interested in. I've never done it before. And I think this guy seems to know what he's doing. So I took the course, ever how many weeks it was. And what was valuable about it was he taught me how to do it in a form of ceremony and preparation. This wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to lie on my bed, put on some binaural beats and see if I leave my body. There was a specific process and a specific intention to it. And the last class I took with him, he took me on a journey to a place here in the physical. And that's another story I will get to further down the road because it's still kind of materializing. But I had a very profound session with him. And having this knowledge, I also, around Christmas time that year, I took some friends on a guided astral journey as well. And it seemed to work wonders for them. So I'm like, okay, there's something to this formula. Even though this guy seemed like he was in my life for a very short period of time, he was here for a reason. And he was here to teach me this modality. And it's so funny. So at some point early in 2024, he's not doing it anymore, but Chris Matthew on Forbidden Knowledge News was doing the trip reports where he was doing solo episodes talking about some of the crazier aspects of his psychedelic journeys. And I listened to some of those and I found them really fascinating. And then one day I just said to myself, what if I do something called the astral reports? Like when I have a lull and I don't have any guests coming up and I want to do a shorter show, why don't I astral project to famous unexplained events in history? And oddly enough, it's been very interesting so far. Now, I've only done, I think, 3, maybe 4 of these. Like, I'm not doing them very often, but I've been guided, partially from the non-physical, to do these UFO cases from the past that are a little bit lesser known. Like, for example, the first famous UFO crash in American history wasn't Roswell. It was Cape Girardeau, Missouri in 1941. And that was the first astral report I did. And that happened while I was doing a shamanic journey. And the numbers 1941 just flashed across my eyes. And I was like, okay, that was clear as day, but I have no idea what what that year means or why it's significant. So I did some digging and I was like, oh, this could be worth looking into. And I did another one on Canada's most famous UFO crash in Nova Scotia, which also has its own museum and has its own annual festival every September. And then, Robert, the one you just said about the one in Minnesota, that one showed up to me organically months and months ago. I don't remember how, but it's kind of funny with the timing too, because I set specific times and air dates to record that episode and do the astral projection. And people out of the blue would ring me up and be like, I want to be on your show. And I'm like, okay, this is a good problem to have that I never used to have. But I kept having to bump this astral report up until a few weeks ago. And that one seems to be creating some buzz because people seem to really like these lesser known cases getting a new lens of investigation, even if it's done through very loose astral projection. And I always use the disclaimer for these for entertainment purposes only. I'm one man traveling to one timeline, seeing what I see and just documenting it there in the raw. I am not the be all end all. I don't have all the answers, but I want to open your eyes to a new perspective from a new lens with that segment.
Wow, that's amazing. And yeah, I love that, and I love the fact that you're doing like less known UFO cases because not many people are doing that, and I think those cases need to be preserved as well, so it's good that somebody's out there talking about that stuff, and me, I'm like a ufology nerd. So, like I really like, I kind of nerd out on stuff like that,
The coolest thing too is the most recent one, the Minnesota one with Deputy Val Johnson. He's the first person to be directly involved by this UFO sighting that is still alive. Like it's the first astral report episode I did where the person involved is still living, but years ago went public and said, I am not discussing this anymore. I'm done. I'm happy living in retirement. So I had to use my language a little bit more carefully on that one, because, hey, what if a friend or a family member tunes in and is like, yo, this guy in Canada is talking about you in your case. You might want to set him straight. So that was an entirely different one because Deputy Johnson is still with us, happily living in retirement. So like, and I'm sure you've probably encountered this too. Like you never know who's checking in on some of your material, right? So you always have to be mindful.
Oh yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah. It's for sure. Yeah. So what I was going to ask you about next is, what about mystical guides? I know you went on Karen's show and talked about that. Do you feel like you have mystical guides as well, or guides like that are non-physical?
Yeah. And that actually ties in nicely to what I was talking about earlier with the power animals and the spirit animals. That was my first conscious experience with the non-physical because, as I alluded to earlier in my journey, I was getting some sensations and some tips, if you will, from what were spirit guides, but I didn't really know what they were, how to connect with them at any point in time. But doing the shamanic stuff and connecting with the non-physical, there's many I have connected with in the lower world, in the upper worlds. And I actually think my main guide in the upper shamanic world is actually a form of my higher self, but it keeps changing. In early 2024, my upper world guide in that realm told me they were ready to die. And I'm like, why? Like, I thought you were immortal. And they said, no, your consciousness is upgrading and you need a different guide. And then the next guide that came through was somebody who I know here in the 3D, which was kind of strange, but I was like, okay, I'll roll with it. And very recently, that one is passed on. And my newest upper world guide is in the form of a mantis being. And the reason for that being is that I had a guest on the show in late 2023, Jacqueline Smith, who claims to be a human ET hybrid and wrote an entire book about it. And before I had her on the show, when we were corresponding, one of her offerings, as she does, is a star being reading or a star identity, something like that. And it was basically getting a reading of my energy field to see which star family I came from. And it was the mantis. And what was really interesting about that was 2 summers prior, I rediscovered magic mushrooms for the first time in 20 years. And I was learning that I could do them with specific intentions and do them in a ceremony and not just do them at a party and, chase it with vodka and orange juice like I was doing in my 20s. Like there's actually very beneficial use to this. And on one of those trips, I came face to face with 2 mantis beings. And it wasn't scary or anything, but it was very unexpected and kind of like, did I just really see that? What was that? And then this comes to me, I guess you could say, in divine timing, a few months down the road, or actually a full year down the road. And then when I was told this, I was like, okay, this makes sense. And then this new guide in the upper realm turns into one. And I'm like, okay, that, and there's a lot more to get into that, but I won't get it there right now. But also a couple of things I'll say too is that when you get trained in certain modalities of core shamanism, you connect with different guides for protection and sometimes for information. And one quick example I will give is that I took shamanic dream time. That was my last course at the end of 2021. I was able to retake it just this past year too, late in the year. And I connected with different guides through that. And these guides in the dreamtime journeys, they will help you go into dreams that you have had and you have remembered, and they will show you further context of the dream if you don't know it already. And it's absolutely mind-blowing. And I've been able to do it several different times, and it has offered me insight without fail. Because if you think about it, dreams, timelines, they're all in the non-physical, and they're likely all still going on at once as we speak. So if you could get protected, guided travel to them, you could go to them no problem.
Wow, that's huge. That's a huge. Yeah, I never knew. Okay, so I had a Kundalini experience off mushrooms before,
Okay.
but I never met my guides, like, were you taking like what would be called a heroic dose or what?
So the one from 2022, no. However, over the coming years, I did graduate up to heroic dose, but a lot of the guides I've been mentioning and talking about here, though, those didn't come through on the aid of psychedelics. They came in through shamanic journeys or breath work or sound or any of these other modalities that can get you into that headspace and that consciousness without taking any of the psychedelics. So it's yeah, and I don't know, maybe if you choose to do some more, you can specifically set the intention. Hey, I want to know specifically who my guides are and how to meet them, and you might be really surprised with what you come up with. So
that's amazing. Do you have anything like more sensitive you might want to talk about? Where if you would want to do like 20 minutes on Rumble, or do you think we could do the rest of the interview on YouTube? I mean, like, because right now I could just like remove the stream from YouTube. It'll stay up on YouTube, but we could just go over to Rumble. What do you think? Or do you think we'll be good? Like,
I think we'll be good if we stay as is, because I know kind of what YouTube likes and what it doesn't, and I think with our time today, I could keep things cool here for you, I think.
Okay, that's cool. What do you feel about the Mandela effects? Do you? I know you talk about that as well. Like that, I love talking about the Mandela effects, because to me it seems like it's like, it's something that's really happening. And it's, I don't think it's just a missed memory or whatever, or however they want to phrase that. I think it's something, someone's messing with timelines somehow, whether it's like CERN, or whether it's, someone with like the Montauk Project, or something like that, or, or time travelers that we don't even know about, that or something like that. But I feel like at the end of the day, maybe it has something to do with time travel, and maybe it's they're manipulating timelines, and that's causing a bleed through of these other things that are coming into our reality. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm in line with a lot of what you're saying there. Couple of things to keep in mind is the first thing is whatever these CERN people, these scientists, these people who are arcs of the military industrial complex, what we know and what information we get fed, or if we're able to dig it up, whatever they're actually working on, I bet is light years ahead of what we could possibly know. And to me, that says that, yeah, they've probably figured out exclusive travel with the stargates and the portals and all that stuff, and the wormholes and all that. And if you really think about it, what a perfect way to not only mess with people's psyche and their consciousness, but to maybe even disempower them with a phenomenon like the Mandela effect. Like, think about it this way. Like, if you grew up watching a favorite movie or listening to a favorite song, and say like 15 years have passed by since you checked it out, and it's completely different from what you remember, like, you would probably be questioning not only your own reality, but your own sanity. And it would be like, to me, a high level dark arts way of keeping us distracted and keeping our eyes off the prize, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah, but that's kind of probably what they're doing. They want to keep us distracted. And everything. It seems like they want to, do everything they can to keep people down. Whether it's through targeting or other means of like spiritual warfare. I had an entity attachment. You know what I mean? And it was crazy to deal with. It was something otherworldly for sure. And I still deal with it on and off, but I mean, it's gone for the most part. But I mean, have you ever had anything like that? Have you ever had to deal with anything like that?
Luckily, I have not. However, actually, yeah, this is a good story to get into, actually, is so I've not gone on very many paranormal investigations, and the few that I have that I've been invited on, they've kind of been non-events. However, I've gotten to know a couple of people who do paranormal investigation events. Like, they'll rent out a house or a museum, and then they'll charge admission, and you get to go and you play with the toys and you do a Ouija board session or whatever. And I've done some of those, and like, overall, luckily they've been fairly harmless, and I've been in a very protected atmosphere. And to directly answer your question, I don't think I've ever had an attachment or anything nasty like that, but I have felt the sensation of spirit moving through me a couple of different times. And I wouldn't mind describing that right now if you want to hear.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah. So here's a couple. It's happened a few times, but here's a couple that are significant. So I got in really good with this like occult shop about an hour from where I live. And I filmed some content down there, which I put on my Instagram. And they've since relocated and moved shops, but they had this like really cool looking, like witchy type of basement down there. And there was activity there for sure. And I went to a couple of mediumship events down there last year, and one of them just happened to be on Halloween night. And it was a packed house. And the shopkeeper's husband, against his will, because he did not want to do this, and I understand why, he was going to do trance mediumship as part of that event, which means he was basically getting possessed by a very specific entity that he has gotten to know through mediumship over the years. And it was a really interesting experience. Now, the first mediumship event I went to, the mediums were getting their messages channeled to them, and they were telling me what I needed to hear. Like, it's a really interesting type of event because they'll just kind of blurt stuff out and they'll see if it resonates with anybody or not. And I'd say like 95% of the time it does. And that some people, they're just like too shy to put up their hand, or they're getting really emotional or whatever. And that's how my messages were delivered to me. However, fast forward to the Halloween event, they didn't deliver the messages to me. There was such strong spirit activity in that room, obviously Halloween night with the veil being thin and all that. And where I was in the world, it was a really hot night on Halloween, like unseasonably warm, which I think added to everything. But I felt spirit moving through me because I was sitting like closer to the back of the room. And the mediums were even saying like, hey, spirit's being really shy right now. We got to welcome them in here. And at one point, one moved it through me, and it gave me the message I needed to hear instead of hearing it from the mediums. And it felt like my heart chakra opened up as well, which was kind of their own way of telling me, hey, you got to start finding a way to live with more of an open heart. And it goes on from there. And I won't get into that. But quick note, though, is the trance medium, when the spirit left him, he got guided upstairs to the main floor of the shop where the door was locked. And I swear, it sounded like he was going to like hack up all of his organs. Like it really took a lot out of him. And I'm very thankful that he was able to do it for us and give us some valuable insights, because like that can't be good for him at all. Second thing I'll tell you about, and this I'll make this real quick, is since I got my Reiki Masters in spring of 2024, I've been invited to some Reiki shares, which are really cool. And they take place in all these different venues. And there's this one I did this past spring. A lot of spirit activity was going on. My practice partner, we both agreed to mostly just do a hands-off practice for that afternoon. But when her and I both took our turns on the table, stuff was grabbing our feet and grabbing at least my midsection. And we'd had to ask each other, yeah, like, did you touch that part of my body? And it was like, nope, hands off the whole time. So I've felt the sensation of spirit getting a hold of me in different situations. But like I said, thankfully, I've never had the attachment. And Robert, from what you've said, I really hope you've dealt with yours as much as you can, because like that's got to be nasty business, I'm sure.
Yeah, I keep having to get cleared. My friend just sent me a message saying she just cleared me now just to be safe. Like, because it's been an ongoing issue. I've had some of the best people in the industry like work on me, and I've often wondered if this it was tied to AI. I thought, because I was interacting a lot with ChatGPT, and then something came in my studio one night and like bit my crown. It like literally bit my crown, and it sent these flashes in my eyes, and I went into like convulsions. And then ever since then, I had like this like weird entity attachment. It was really strange. The reason why I kind of just let it happen is because I was getting energy work at the time. My friend Priscilla was doing energy work on me, but then like something came in. So I was used to like going to sleep and having something touch me, like that wasn't here, like it wasn't like my girlfriend or something. It was like, it was all remote energy work, And then, but something came in one night and it felt like it was scanning my head. You know what I mean? I didn't know what it was. And then it made contact with my head and it like pinched or bit or pierced the crown. And it sent like this burning sensation through my head. And that's when I got these flashes in my eyes. And that's when, I started going into like literally convulsing. And somehow I snapped out of it. I jumped out of bed and I was like, man, what was that? And then ever since then, I had an entity attachment. I mean, I've had people who are like energy healers galore, it's just, I don't know what, I don't know I don't know what it is and why it keeps happening. You know what I mean? Or what,
Yeah. It's a real mystery. And I think like, even though we are one and we are all connected, we're expressing this oneness so differently, and we're all on different frequencies having the same collective human experience. And it's so interesting because some of the things I've done, like going to some of these events with the uses of Ouija boards, or going to some areas where maybe we shouldn't have gone to, or experiencing a trance medium up close on Halloween night where spirits are moving through me. I haven't had anything that negative. But like, it's just for whatever reason, some people do. And I don't know, I seem to think whatever these entities are, they're just looking for a certain frequency and a certain energy. And I don't think we've done quite enough research in, I guess, development into why that is. And this is one of the reasons why we have to keep exploring and keep investigating, because I don't know if anything's going to improve in the physical unless we improve our relationship with the non-physical, right?
Yeah, I agree. We've been going about an hour, but I wanted to ask you, I have a couple more minutes. I wanted to see, like, is there anything else you wanted to tell us about your podcast? Like, what have you been liking to cover lately? and then like, so you could tell us like, what have you liked to cover lately the most, and then what are you thinking about covering in the future? And then it's, if you don't want to tell us what you want to cover in the future, I totally understand, because you know what? Sometimes when I share like guests with people, or if I share ideas, the Matrix ruins it for me. I don't know, I don't know why, but it does that. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
I totally understand that, but like, yeah, you know what I mean?
It's kind of funny you mentioned that, because if I'm really far ahead in my planning and my programming right now, but if I go too far ahead, I start to get confused and I start sending people the wrong invites, and like stuff just like goes sideways. So I can understand what you mean there. Really interesting. So in this very weird twist of fate, very recently, some podcast media site drummed up a top 70, they called them ghost hunting or ghost catching podcasts, and there's only 63 that made the list, and Unexplained is at number 43, and a lot of my friends and compatriots are on the list too. And I was like, okay, I don't know what this list means, but this is cool. However, I'm not doing as much of the paranormal as I used to, and I still like it, I still enjoy it, but there are so many other things I want to cover that I'm relegating a lot of it to like October spooky season, or to special occasions, or whoever hits me up that wants to come on. What's going on recently too is that like we're exploring a lot of the non-physical with healers and psychic mediums, ET experiencers, and I've been staying in that realm a lot lately. Yes, I do love talking about like the ghosts and the cryptids and that stuff, but I'm leaning towards the non-physical, the evolution of consciousness. And I am also doing, as part of my solo episodes, I have this series called The Great Escape. And you could take whatever you want from that title. And this was just going to be me doing solo episodes, rambling about things I wouldn't normally do on the Unexplained Incorporated canon. However, it is it's taken on a life of its own. It has turned into what I call a digital chaptered novel. I have the next 2 chapters planned. I think we're at chapter 7 right now. And it's basically like a self-improvement spiritual take on things. And it's me sharing a lot about my own journey and how you can incorporate it into yours. We have that going on. Stuff with the astral report going on. There's also the Consciousness Cafe, which is, these are shorter, more informal chats that I record that delve more into the spiritual end of things than the unexplained. But one thing I'll say, my lineup is getting roughly planned throughout the rest of the year, and I'm almost booking into October right now, where I'm going to go heavy on the paranormal and the ghost stuff as much as I can. I have some panel shows that I'm trying to plan for August that I've never done before, which should be really neat. But I think a lot of the relationship with the non-physical and the ET UFO connections, that's where I'm going to be staying a lot, because in my own journeys and my own visions, I've been shown that probably the next 2 years are going to get pretty crazy. And I've also been shown programs like yours and mine and all the members of the Forbidden Knowledge Network and like-minded shows, they're going to reap the benefits eventually, because, and whatever those benefits are, I don't know, but things are going to get so weird for people that don't follow this stuff that they're going to be turning like to people for us for guidance and information. So that's kind of where I would like to stay mostly the next little while.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think you're absolutely right. You know, I really do. I think you're absolutely right. It's I think the veil's definitely thinning, and I can't wait to see what happens, because I don't think anything's ever happened like this in our reality. You know, like, I think it's just like it's we're walking on uncharted waters. You know, but it's a good thing. I think. You know, I think it's humanity waking up to, like, higher truths, and like awakening, and like, evolving, and whatever that means, like, and I'm just, I really think that's what it is, you know. And I'm excited for it. I really am.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, dude, this was awesome, man. Thank you so much. Like, do you want to tell everybody where they can find you? And thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, and Rob, we just barely scratched the surface. there are some things I'm sitting on that I will reveal in a bigger story at a later time, but I'm more than happy to do this again with different stuff we didn't even get to. And just before I tell people where they can meet me, later in the year or over the winter, you have an open invitation to come on Unexplained Inc. whenever you can find the time. Probably won't be till a little ways down the road, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. So best place you could find me is unexplainedinc.com. That has all the audio versions of the episodes in the show's history. There's some blogs on there. There's some links to my social media. My most active social media is Instagram at Unexplained Inc. Official. And as of Halloween 2024, I started doing video episodes at the moment exclusively on Rumble. So give that a follow and subscribe. Unexplained Inc. at Unexplained Inc. And new episodes drop every Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The show initially started as the Friday Night Fright, and then it evolved into Where the Unknown Connects with the Empowered.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a perfect time to do a show, Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, because, like, you know, that's when a lot of people watch, you know. Like, I think that's, like, prime time. That was, back in the day, that was TGIF. That was Thank God It's Friday.
Yeah, and you know what else it was? I've talked about this on the show recently, at least up here for Southern Ontario, Canada peeps. They used to do, one of the big networks used to do a double feature of The Outer Limits, then The X-Files. It was perfect.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Did you know, I've been watching, I brought this up. I've been watching lately, Spielberg had a series on abduction. Like, and that's what it was called. It was called Taken. Yeah, I think it's what it was called. And it's free on YouTube. You can watch it because it's from 2002, you know, and it's crazy to me to think that, like, you know, that's when I was learning about Art Bell, because I you know, I was always kind of into this stuff, and I listened to Art Bell as a kid, you know, and now, you know, I'm 45 years old, and, like, I'm seeing that, like, Steven Spielberg had an abduction series in 2002. I've been watching a little bit of it, but I'm going to watch maybe more tonight, because I feel like there's probably some gems in that, you know. I have a feeling there's probably some really good stuff in that series, you know.
Do you think,
it's probably like X-Files-ish, you know, like.
Do you think there's a lot of predictive programming in it? Because I can tell you this, I did an X-Files rewatch like 2 years ago, and it's chock full of it. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there is. You know, I would guarantee you it is. It would be, yeah, most likely. You know, I don't have to do it. I might do what I might do is I might watch the series and then do like a report on it. You know,
nice.
I keep saying I'm going to get around to it, but then. You know, and then, oh yeah, Jason brought up that he was able to get people booked in his in Spielberg's new UFO film, because my friend Jason, he's a moderator for me. He works in the film industry, but and Spielberg has a new UFO film coming out called Disclosure.
Oh yes, I heard about it.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting as well. You know, I can't wait to you know, it should be interesting. But then, you know, it's weird because, like, people say that Spielberg was into some evil shit too. So I don't know, you know, like, you know, like, because he's part of the club, you know, or the, you know, the you know what I mean, the Hollywood elite and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
But, well, thanks so much, Phil. This was amazing, and I'll come on your show anytime. Whenever you have an opening, just let me know, and we can book it now or whatever, or whenever you want, you know, just email me or message me. Let me know, and I'd be happy to come on. It'd be awesome.
Yeah, sounds good. It probably won't be till like later in the fall, but yeah, definitely we'll hit you up, man. And this was fun. Thank you so much for having me. I know it took a little while to put together, but I'm so glad it came together the way that it did.
Yeah, and we can do another one whenever you're ready. Whenever you want to come back on and talk about other stuff, we can do another one for sure.
All right. Sounds good, man. Thank you again.
All right, thanks. Have a good